So you've got yourself a camera and you want to buy your first prime lens. You've done a bit of Googling and Google tells you that you should either get a 35mm or 50mm lens. So which one do you pick? Picking your first prime lens is like picking your first love. Which one should you go for? You've got two very similar but different choices. It feels like the most important decision of your life, but you've not got any previous experience. But the thing is, once you bought it, taken it home, and you mounted it, you can't quite take it back so easily. That's when things get messy.
So which one would you love more, the 35mm or the 50mm? What are the characteristics that would make it a match for you? The 35mm is an incredibly practical lens.
It's like a 50mm, but a bit wider. In the oldish days, the 35mm focal length was popular with photojournos. It's a sensible choice. What if the 35mm lens is practical, then the 50mm doesn't kind of make sense, does it? But there's a certain kind of artistic coolness you get by shooting with a 50.
It is a standard lens, but the tighter crop might make you feel that it's a one-trick artistic pony.
Great for street photography and portraits.
Well, yeah, just street photography and portraits. The 35mm lens can be useful in a number of situations. It could be argued that the 35mm lens is the perfect focal length for being useful for a number of different scenarios.
It's great for loads of things. It's so versatile. Arguably, if you were to take only one lens with you for travelling, this would be it. It's good in tight spaces. It's good for landscapes. That's all we can find, unfortunately. Screen, and of course street photography. When you're working with tight spaces, 35 is just wide enough to get you that shot.
But what about arty things like selective focus, shallow depth of field and bokeh? Well, you're better off with a 50. Standing on the same spot and shot at f2.8, the 35 appears to have less bokeh-liciousness going on. Even when you move forwards with the 35 to make the subject the same size as with a 50, you still don't get that subject separation like with a 50. It sucks in more of the background. The 50 might create some blurry, hazy stuff that you won't understand why, how or what the hell, but it does look cool.
Of course, if you want to get wider with a 50, you just step back. But then you can only step back so far sometimes. With a 35, if you want to get close in, well, you get close in, don't you?
With the 35mm lens, you kind of have to get closer to your subject, more intimate. You're at ones with the people. The 50 can be a bit standoffish, almost antisocial I guess, but the 50 doesn't need friends. The 50mm is quite cheap.
Well, it's all relative really, isn't it? But if you think about it, a 35mm f1.4 is usually going to be much more expensive than a 50mm f1.4. Unless you get one of these. They're not cheap.
And what they like to hold.
A lot of 50mm lenses are lightweight and compact. Or maybe not this one. Oh! It's so lightweight and compact. Well, if we go back to that whole 35 1.4 versus 50 1.4, the 35 is going to be massive. Massive, I tell you. Why? I don't know, there's something to do with like mathematics and stuff. They have to 50 take away 15mm, so therefore they have to add 15mm else, literally, physically. Is that it? No, it's not it. It's just bigger because it is. I didn't design it. Oh, Jesus Christ.
2 focal lengths, 2 standard lenses, but with 2 unique characteristics. Because they're vaguely similar, it sort of doesn't make sense to buy a 35 and a 50, but what you essentially prefer depends on how you shoot. You might like having more of the background in your images, to have everything in your shot in focus. You might prefer to take images when you're closer to your subject, in which case the 35 is the better choice. The 50 may not be as versatile, won't be good in tight spaces, not really as suitable lens if it's the only lens you're taking for travel, but things in the frame, in terms of proportion, just look right. It's good for bokeh whores too. Using 50 doesn't detach you completely from the subject. The 50 may be awkward, but for street photography, I keep coming back to it every single time.